President Donald Trump just announced an 100% increase in the tariff rate for China. It's now sitting at 130%. China has imposed a ban on exports of rare earths for specific uses due to national security. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Let's talk about it.
It's really hard to know who launched this battle between the two countries first. We know that we can start right now. We know that the US is now putting these additional tariffs. They'd already negotiated to have 30% tariffs that China was meant to apply to their exports. But now we also know that the US is retaliating because China just recently has announced that they wanted to limit the rare earth minerals that are so valuable and important for the entire supply chain of the tech industry in the States. And so we can keep going backwards and backwards. But I think one of the things that's really important for us to talk about is why is it that China is the enemy of the United States right now? We've talked about this in past episodes. My contention remains that China is in such a dominant position, not just because of manufacturing, but their global footprint and the assets that they've put in place. And they've been quietly moving over the last 2 decades or so into becoming one of the most powerful strategic superpowers on the planet. And that in itself is making the US reflect on how is it that we regain some of the power that we ended up losing. And that isn't just manufacturing, that is defense, that is the global footprint that they have across the world in terms of partnerships and work that they do with governments. What do you think?
The China-US relationship has been fraught, to say the least, since earlier this year. We've seen tariffs being imposed left, right, and center. They've gotten up to ridiculous levels, although I think this 130% now is just a reflection of what we've seen. These are not values that are real. This is all being used as pure negotiation tactics. It almost feels very reactive from the US's side. It's like, this is not a calculated move. Why are you not thinking through this logically? Why are you not thinking through this diplomatically? And it very much also feels like the US doesn't think it needs to be diplomatic. Like, I'm the United States of America. I can demand this. I can do what I want. And you see that China is also responding to the NVIDIA chip ban / demotion that had been placed on them. You're seeing that China is also going to be in the receiving end of the H-1B restriction that President Donald Trump imposed. Yes, they may not be as impacted as India is, but they're still being impacted. So China is responding. And it very much now seems like the United States is being forced to reconcile that it is managing one country, not the entire world's economy. It might feel like it can, and it might feel like the entire world's economy is at its fingertips, but China is the first to push back on that.
I want to talk quickly because we had a video that went a little bit viral on YouTube, and we started getting tons and tons of comments from the viewers. Now, it's hard to know who YouTube ended up serving this content to, but one of the things that really was surprisingly resounding was the fact that people were in support of China. And the reason that I'm surprised is because the vast majority of the traffic was from the US. And I really felt as though there has been this anti-China rhetoric for a long time. But at the same time, there is this sort of allergic reaction to what the US government is doing from a geopolitical standpoint. And as a result, even US citizens and people living in the United States are really pushing back in terms of what they think is okay for the US government to do. And this is the part where I think that China is actually playing the game really well. Now, we know that they are not just a dominant superpower, but they have assets that other countries really don't have. And as a result, they can sit and negotiate with the United States from a position of power and not one of weakness. But at the same time, I also think that it's really interesting that they are not retaliating loudly, they're retaliating quietly. And the reason that I really appreciate this stance is, you know what? I think that they are learning to play the game with the United States in an incredibly effective way.
We've always said that China is thinking at least 45 steps ahead. And there have been times where you and I have really questioned why certain things are happening or why they've made certain decisions, only for it to become crystal clear months and sometimes even years later. So when in doubt, I always give China the benefit of the doubt. I do wonder what's going to happen as a result of this. I mean, China must have known this was going to be President Trump and the United States' response. So what is it that they really want? What are they willing to negotiate? Because they are going to give them these rare earth minerals. And there is something else bigger at picture here.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. My opinion is the most that I can offer here because there's very little evidence out there. But I think that the US does not want to be number 2. at the global stage. They're very nervous with a China that is not willing to remain at number two. They're very clear about this from their public statements. And I think this is one of the first points. But then the second thing is that I do believe that the US now has gambled on basically their entire economy just into the tech space. They have been spending trillions of dollars now to be able to support it, propel it, and make it the central nervous system of the globe. And if that play gets blocked because there's not enough rare earth minerals or some other very valuable aspects that China does offer, for example, from a manufacturing perspective, this in itself could really hamper the United States and throw them into a recession that the country has never ever seen before. And so these are the places that I think that China, they do not need to play the game. And it's really unfortunate that we're describing this as a game, but they do not need to play the game the way that the United States is.
They don't need to play by the rules that the United States has established.